From Los Angeles, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the Puck Podcast. It's Monday, January the 27th. This is our first period of a three-period podcast. This first period also being broadcast on YouTube. We're going to recap the past week in the NHL on and off the ice. Our second period is our special interview or special feature segment. This week, Doug is going to have a chat with Zach Martin, the host of Locked On Hurricanes, to talk about the Hurricanes' part in a big three-team trade this week. Our third period is our fan feedback segment where we have listener emails and talk about our off-ice report, what's going on in our lives. You can find all three periods on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you're seeing on YouTube, please subscribe. It just takes a second, but it makes a big difference for us as we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. And at last check, we were at 927. So if you subscribe, you'll also help us and get notified when we have new shows like this, the Puck Podcast. Also, the Puck Podcast Hockey Minute, a daily recap of the night and preview in the NHL. We've got our Puck Podcast reaction videos on big things that happen around the NHL. And also something new, Puck Podcast watch parties. You get notified as well. And we'll have more on that coming up.
Eddie and I have been working in sports media for over 30 years combined at Fox Sports TV, Fox Sports Radio, and NFL Network, separately, but also together over at Fox Sports TV. Our passion, though, is hockey, and this is our 19th season covering the NHL as members of the media. We've been putting out the Puck Podcast every single week since July of 2006, a streak now of 966 weeks, with only 1 week in that entire run where we failed to have a show. And if you're wondering what happened that 1 week, well, I was in Australia, and Eddie had a death in the family. Other than that, though, we're pretty much here all the time. But over the next three periods, we're going to tell you how every NHL team did the past 7 days. We'll recap all the trades, signings, suspensions, and milestones. And as always, we cover all 32 teams equally as we recap every game over the past 7 days. Sometimes it'll just be a brief mention, score, and some stats. Sometimes we go a little bit more in depth if the game was significant or interesting. But we start with the big news of the week, and we do have big news this week. And for that, I turn it over to my good friend, my co-host, and a man who once ate a French fry sandwich because he was served a hamburger with no beef, Eddie Garcia.
That is a true story. Very rare that you have a little true story as you toss it to me, but that one is in fact true. The NHL trade deadline is still over a month away, March 7th, but we had a huge deal this week, a three-team trade involving the Avalanche, Hurricanes, and Blackhawks. Carolina lands star forward Mikko Rantanen from Colorado, as well as former league MVP Taylor Hall from Chicago. Colorado gets forward Martin Necas, as well as Jack Drury, a second-round pick in 2025 and a fourth-round pick in 2026, all from Carolina. Chicago gets a third-round pick in 2025 from the Hurricanes and will retain half of Rantanen's remaining $9.25 million salary for the rest of the season. Rantanen is 28 years old. He is the marquee name in this trade, was in his 10th season in Colorado. At the time of the deal, he was sixth in the NHL with 64 points in 49 games, including 25 goals. Since the 2021-22 season, he is fifth among NHL players with 365 points in 286 games. He's also fifth in goals, 160 over that span. He was a part of the Avalanche Stanley Cup winning team in 2021-22, but he was an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. Contract talks between Rantanen and the Avalanche apparently had stalled, with a significant gap reportedly between the two sides. As for Taylor Hall, he's 33. This will be his seventh NHL team in a 15-year career, including winning a Hart Trophy as the NHL MVP with the New Jersey Devils in 2017-18. At the time of the trade, he played in 46 games this season in Chicago with 9 goals and 24 points, 879 career games for the Oilers, Devils, Bruins, Sabres, and Blackhawks. He had 275 career goals and 721 career points. The 26-year-old Marty Necas had played parts of 8 seasons in the NHL, all with Carolina. In his 49 games with Carolina this season, he had 16 goals and 55 points. In 412 career games in the NHL, he had 113 goals and 298 points. And 24-year-old Jack Drury played parts of 4 seasons with Carolina, 39 games this year. He had 3 goals and 9 points, 152 career NHL games, 14 goals and 45 points. So those are all the particulars of the deal. I now turn it back over to Doug Stolhand. Doug, your thoughts initially on this huge trade?
Well, the conventional wisdom is whoever gets the best player wins the trade. And there's no doubt that the Carolina Hurricanes got the best player in Mikko Rantanen. He's on pace for his third straight 100-point season. Those guys are very hard to obtain. He is one of the absolute elite players in the league from top to bottom, both as a goal scorer and as a playmaker. He had 55 goals 2 years ago, 42 goals last year. He's on pace for 40 goals again this season. So this is a guy that can both score goals and set players up. He has had over 50 assists in each of the last 3 seasons and is on pace to do so again. So the Hurricanes are getting an absolutely elite player. And if you look at what they gave up to get him, a player in Marty Necas, who is a good player, but nothing close to elite, but a good player. Jack Drury, who is just a guy, honestly, nothing special. And then a second-round pick and a fourth-round pick. Or is it a third-round pick that they gave up to Chicago? Either way, it's draft picks that they're not going to use, not of value in their cup window, and a couple of players that are absolutely expendable. So, and they get Taylor Hall, who is still a good player for your bottom 6. So this is a humongous win for the Carolina Hurricanes and had to be, look, I'm not saying everybody in the locker room was happy to see Marty Necas go, but they had to be happy to see Mikko Rantanen come in. And it has to give them incredible confidence to see what management has done to support them this season. And I believe they will be able to retain him. I'm sure that they did not go into this without knowing at least what his contract requests were going to be and whether or not they could afford that. Now it's up to him to sign it. He could be an unrestricted free agent. Mikko Rantanen could. But I believe and we will get into this in the second period with Zach Martin of Locked On Hurricanes about why I think this is likely to be retained. But even if it's just for this season, it makes them a lot better. They were already a good team and a cup contender, not a cup favorite, but a cup contender. I think this gets them closer to the cup favorite category, and there's still time to go, and they still have room to make more moves potentially. So we will see, but I think this is a huge win for Carolina. I think it's a good job of asset management by the Colorado Avalanche, because you had a player that you knew you were not going to be able to retain. Once you are in that situation, your choices are keep the player through the season and hope to trade him before free agency, which your return is not going to be great because teams are only going to be trading with the hope of re-signing him at that point without having a chance to showcase their franchise on the ice for months with the players in the locker room. And the player is only weeks away from free agency at that point, so he may want to see what his offers are. Or you trade him before the season begins, where you get maximum return. This is that middle ground. They didn't wait until the deadline. They did this very quietly, but I'm sure it was not quiet to GMs. I'm sure it was known that Mikko Rantanen was available and who would like to make him an offer. Why the Blackhawks got involved in this, I have no idea. They just decided to be nice guys and facilitate this deal and take on half of Mikko Rantanen's salary for the rest of the season to make it all work. I think they get a third-round pick out of it. Whoop-de-doo. So overall, the Hurricanes are the biggest winners, obviously. The Avalanche did a good job of managing their asset. It is a painful move to make, but a necessary one, rather than lose him for nothing, as we saw the Islanders do with John Tavares many years ago. You can't afford to have franchise caliber players walk away for no return. It is very difficult to rebound from that, as the Islanders have shown. And this was a good job by the Avalanche, but a very painful departure of a star player. And it had to be very difficult for the Avalanche to see Rantanen walk out simply because of money. And, but that's his right. It's his turn to get paid. He shouldn't have to take a team-friendly deal if he wants to get his value. And his value is probably closer to $14 million a year at this point than it is $11 million a year. So He's going to get his money either from the Hurricanes or through free agency. But the big winner is the Hurricanes. Second place is the Avalanche. And then the Blackhawks are just, the vulture coming in to feast on the carcass, I guess, and get a draft pick for literally spending money. They basically bought themselves a draft pick.
Yeah, I don't disagree much with what you said. Certainly, I agree with you that Carolina is the big winner. I think, how big of a winner will depend on if they can re-sign him. Of course, Carolina had a big trade at the deadline last year for Jake Gensel, and they weren't able to retain him. He goes to Tampa Bay, so it does. We'll see. For Rantanen, though, you're right. He does deserve to get paid. Colorado's paying big money to Cale Makar, or they're going to sign Cale Makar, or they've already signed Mikko Rantanen. Cale Makar is going to get paid a lot as well. And they just felt like maybe they couldn't have all three of those guys on their roster and still have enough money to, retain pieces. Or I did see something interesting, and I didn't really take this into consideration. Apparently, if Elliot Friedman had said that the Avalanche had told Mikko Rantanen that they would make him the highest paid winger in the NHL. And your guy, Artemi Panarin, is currently the highest paid winger in the league. I believe it was like $11.5 million a year. So they were willing to give him, let's just say 12, but they weren't going to give him elite center money, what Draisaitl and McKinnon, those guys are making. So I just thought, elite forward, to me, I didn't know, and I don't know if that's the way it is around the league, and I understand centers being maybe valued more than wingers, but I didn't take that into account, that maybe the position he plays had something to do with how much money the Avalanche might have been willing to offer him or not. So we'll see in the end what he gets from Carolina, if it is in fact, $14 million or something around Leon Draisaitl money. But that was something I hadn't even really taken into account, that the Avalanche weren't willing to pay him because he's not a center, he's a winger. Chicago, I thought they could have thought they would have gotten a little more out of that than just the third round pick being involved in this, but okay, they got a third round pick out of it. But for Colorado, it's obviously very tough because this is a team that has cup aspirations now, and they've made themselves less of a team now. And I agree with you. I like Marty Necas. He's a good player, but he's not Mikko Rantanen. So, right. It's for Avalanche fans. I know it's really tough because Rantanen's such a great player, won a cup with him, has done everything the right way, and now it's his turn to get paid. As you said, it's not fair to him that he takes some sort of hometown discount. And I think that's, hopefully, I don't know if the fans understand that or not, but that's what's fair for him. But they had to make this move. As you said, you can't let somebody like that go for nothing. And if they were really that far apart on what he wanted, then they had to make a decision. The only thing I wonder is, did it have to come now? Could they have let it played out a little bit more and maybe the two sides come closer together? Or do you think they felt like they needed to do it now to kind of pull the Band-Aid on it and get it over with and let them kind of settle into who they're going to be, with a lot of runway left, right? They didn't want to do it at the last moment, and then maybe you're reeling a little bit more. I don't know.
Well, you got to do it now, in my opinion, because of a couple of factors. One, potential injury. Obviously, if Necas gets hurt, that scuttles the deal. If Taylor Hall gets hurt, that scuttles the deal. There's a lot of moving pieces here. Jack Drury, God forbid Mikko Rantanen gets hurt, the deal is off. But twofold, it becomes, if you make the deal now, which they did, as you said, it gives you a few weeks to see what kind of team you have before the deadline. You can address moves before the deadline. The team, the shock is over. Games are being played. You're back on the ice. We see what kind of team we look like without Mikko Rantanen and with Marty Necas and with Jack Drury. Where do we need to make moves to potentially go after a Stanley Cup again this year? So I think it's the right move. Whereas if you do that at the deadline, if you do it at the trade deadline and maybe get a better return, you're not going to get that same opportunity, because then you realize, we really need this. We really need X, Y, Z. It's too late. The rosters are frozen. So it gives them some flexibility there. The uncertainty of Gabe Landeskog returning, hanging over the team, makes it difficult, because if he does return at some point, then you have to have the cap space for him to return. If he doesn't, you've got the money to make Rantanen the highest paid player on the team. And that's the other factor, is that McKinnon's only making $12.6 million. I say only. He is one of the absolute best players in the world as well. So are you going to make him your captain and your second, your on ice captain, your assistant captain? Gabriel Landeskog is the captain, but has not been on the ice. Are you going to make your best player in Nathan MacKinnon the second highest paid player on the roster? That's a difficult thing to say to the locker room and potentially to MacKinnon. But I don't know if McKinnon's ego is such that he would care. Would he rather have Rantanen on the team and be making $1.4 million a year less than him? I don't know. I don't know those conversations. From what we've heard, this is not something that is new. This has been in talks for quite a while. And like I said, we'll get more into the timeline of this trade in the second period with Zach Martin. But shocking news, and it's a reminder of the adage we have said on this show for years, Eddie, that the rumor mills and all the rumor sites of we're hearing this player is being talked to about with this team. The deals you hear about rarely happen, and the deals that happen you rarely hear about. This came absolutely out of the blue, and we were all thunderstruck by the news that Mikko Rantanen was now on the Carolina Hurricanes, who become a very dangerous team in the Eastern Conference.
The other story of the week involved another big name, and that was Edmonton Oilers star Connor McDavid, who was hit with a 3-game suspension by the NHL Department of Player Safety after delivering a cross-check to the head of Vancouver's Connor Garland. The 3-time Hart Trophy winner was previously suspended once in his NHL career for an illegal check to the head of Islanders' Nick Leddy back in 2019. Also was fined $5,000 in 2021 for an elbow to Jesperi Kotkaniemi of the Canadiens. McDavid, fourth in the NHL in scoring with 65 points in 43 games at the time of the suspension. He did not appeal the suspension, and he forfeited, was it $195,000 in salary for missing those 3 games. Also, Canucks defenseman Tyler Myers received a 3-game suspension for a very similar cross-check to the head of Edmonton's Eric Bouchard in almost the exact same time that McDavid had his cross-check as well. Doug, you were not thinking the NHL was going to suspend him. I said I thought it was going to be 2 games. They give him 3, and when I saw this story, I texted you and said, the NHL actually did the right thing, but we better not get used to it.
Well, yeah, I'm curious what role the conversation we had last week, and not our conversation, but the larger conversation, played in this, where they let him walk on the elbow. And I forget who he elbowed in the head intentionally. It was a
Marcus
player on the
Johansson.
Wild. Yeah. They let him go with that. Didn't even give him a fine. And the next game, he goes out there and cross-checks a dude in the head intentionally. And I wonder if it's like the conversation when they had the hearing was like, this is, even though we didn't have a conversation with you, that's obviously 2 transgressions in a row of reckless play at somebody's head, an opponent's head. We can't have this. And if we let you get away with this, it sets a precedent for any player that is frustrated at the end of a game, which is what this was, that they can cross-check somebody in the head, their opponent in the head, and get away with it. And would you want that going the other way, Connor? Of course not. He's not happy with a 3-game suspension, but it was earned. I was very surprised they gave him this, because the star treatment we've seen in the NHL over the years while we've been doing this show, we've seen them waive automatic suspensions for star players like Evgeny Malkin. It's an automatic suspension if you get a major fighting penalty within the last 5 minutes of a game. Evgeny Malkin gets one. Well, automatics, more of a guidance. And suddenly it's waived. So we've seen them give star treatment. And I thought that was going to be the case here. Very surprised that this ended up being a 3-game suspension. I'm pleased that it was, because it was earned, but I just did not think the NHL would have the testicles to go ahead and make this suspension to the face of the league, really, and the best player in the league in Connor McDavid.
I thought some of the reaction, while I guess, typical, from the Oilers and from his teammates and from Connor McDavid himself were pretty laughable. The Oilers released a statement saying that they were disappointed and frustrated over the suspension. Corey Perry, his teammate, asked, why are we not protecting the superstars like every other league does? Mahomes and LeBron, they are protected superstars. Like, what do we need to protect Connor McDavid? He wasn't the one who got cross-checked in the face. He was the one who did the cross-checking. What is he talking about? And then McDavid talked about, being frustrated with the lack of consistency in officiating. And it's like, we're not going to address what the actual issue is. We're going to talk about other things.
That's not uncommon.
It's not, but it's still
right
ridiculous.
Of course, but that's what.
Like if McDavid would have gotten tackled by Garland and then afterwards in the locker room said, "Hey, I got tackled. I got held down. What are we doing?"
Know he had the leg lock on him. He was holding him down and keeping him back.
That's fine if he wants to complain about that. That's fine.
Right.
But to cross-check someone in the face and then complain about that, I mean, that's ridiculous. What does he need to be protected from? I don't understand this. What Corey Perry is talking about. You want to let him get away with doing that? That's protecting the stars? It doesn't make any sense.
No, I have no idea what Corey Perry is talking about. And the Oilers' statement was purely to placate their fans. It had nothing to do with the suspension because, as you said, they were disappointed and frustrated. Well, we were all disappointed in the actions of Connor McDavid when he decided to cross-check a guy in the head. And we were all, disappointed in the NHL not giving him any suspension for the elbow that he did or any punishment. So it's at the end of the day, he got a 3-game suspension. I hope that he has somewhat learned that he is going to be held accountable. And I'm most happy that if he does this again, that more the message it sends to the league that no matter who you are, if you do this, you're going to get suspended.
Well, that's what it should be. But that's
what it should be.
I'm skeptical that it will be.
But that's the message it sends, that we're not going to give you beneficial treatment if you are a star player. And secondly, it keeps him accountable that if he continues to do stuff like this, he has some sheets in the folder for past transgressions that will add to his suspension going forward. So I was happy. I was pleasantly surprised by the NHL's decision. But as you said in the text to me, I would not advise people to get used to this kind of judgment from the Department of Player Safety because the wheel of justice is as random as a roulette wheel. And this time it happened to land on 3 games.
All right, let's get to the past week in the NHL. We go all the way back to last Monday where we had 9 games on the schedule, a rare busy Monday because it was a holiday in the United States. We will start with the Atlantic Division leading Maple Leafs beating the Lightning 5-3. Toronto's Matthew Nyes. I saw Matthews and just assumed. Toronto's Matthew Nyes had 2 goals in the win, numbers 17 and 18 for him. William Nylander gets his 28th of the year, and Austin Matthews his 19th of the season. In the loss for Tampa Bay, Nick Paul had 2 goals, numbers 12 and 13. Wild knocked off the Avalanche in Denver 3-1. Yakov Trenin scored the game winner in the third period for Minnesota. Marc-Andre Fleury, 26 saves in net, as the Wild improved to an NHL best 17-5-3 on the road this season at that point. NHL leading scorer Nathan McKinnon in the loss for Colorado gets his 18th goal of the season. Blues edged the Golden Knights in Vegas 5-4 in a shootout. Braden Shen and Jake Neighbors scored both in regulation and in the shootout for St. Louis in the victory. In the loss for Vegas, Pavel Doroforov gets his 20th of the year. Jack Eichel his 12th. That was with 30 seconds left, and the goalie pulled to at least get a point out of it and force overtime for Vegas. The 2 points, though, for St. Louis moved him to a tie with Vancouver, 1 point back of Calgary for the final wildcard spot in the West. Vegas had lost 6 of 7 at that point, but they were still holding on to first place in the Pacific Division, 1 point up on the Oilers. Also news for Vegas, forward William Karlsson was injured in this game. He's now out week to week with a lower body injury.
I would assume as we are coming up on the Four Nations tournament, he will be out through the Four Nations tournament and hopefully be back when play resumes in late February.
And some news coming up on a Vegas Golden Knight and the Four Nations face-off.
Yeah, it's the usual timing for the Vegas Golden Knights with long-term injured reserve.
Islanders cooled off the Blue Jackets with a 3-1 win. Bo Horvat scored twice, numbers 15 and 16, and goalie Ilya Sorokin 29 saves in net for New York. One note for the Islanders, defenseman Noah Dobson was injured in this game. He's now out week to week with a lower body injury. As a result, the Islanders signed veteran defenseman Tony DeAngelo for the rest of the season for the league minimum. Hurricanes got by the Blackhawks 4-3 in overtime. Sebastian Aho gets the overtime game winner for Carolina, his 14th of the year. Seth Jarvis added his 16th, and Eric Stahl had the only goal in the third period. That tied it. That was his 700th career point in his 1,300th NHL game. Carolina goalie Frederik Andersen picked up the win in his return to action. He had been out since October 26th with an injury. It was also his 500th career game.
And his 299th career win, second most in NHL history through 500 games. The record is Andrei Vasilevsky, who had 306 wins through the first 500 games of his career.
In the loss for Chicago, Tyler Bertuzzi had his 17th goal of the season. Bruins took care of the Sharks 6-3. Boston outscoring San Jose 4-0 in the third period, with Charlie Coyle scoring the game-tying and game-winning goals, numbers 11 and 12 on the season for him. David Pastrnak added his 22nd, Brad Marchand his 17th. Bruins had won 14 straight games over San Jose at that point. The Sharks' last win over Boston was in 2016.
And that is the fifth longest winning streak against any one franchise in the last 40 years for any team. The longest winning streak against one team in the last 40 years is also held by the Bruins, as they beat the Coyotes 19 straight times from 2010 to 2022. We covered every one of those 19 losses by the Coyotes here on the show. And the second longest streak is also held by the Bruins, as they beat the Senators 17 straight times from 1992 to 1995. So they are chasing their own record there. But as you look at that list here on YouTube, if you're watching, I will read it to you if you're not, so we don't just have a long pause here. But you see some of these wins, and if you think, why are so many of them current? It's because there are no ties anymore. It's very difficult to have a winning streak of that length and never tie a game. When they got rid of the ties, that made it a lot easier. So they're all, well, plus it's all the last 40 years, but you think maybe the Oilers would have beaten a bad team a lot back in the day. I'm sure they did, but they probably had at least one tie mixed in there, and that is not the case here. So next up, if they beat the Sharks in their next meeting, that would tie them for the fourth longest, beat them two more times, third longest, and so on and so on. So long time, as you said, and that's the Joe Thornton rivalry there between the Bruins and the Sharks. It doesn't quite go back to when Joe Thornton was on the Bruins, but it certainly covered a lot of the games of him with the Sharks against the Bruins.
Utah Hockey Club surprised the Central Division leading Jets with a 5-2 win. Utah jumped out to a 4-0 lead, never looked back. Logan Cooley and Clayton Keller each scoring their 16th goals of the season. One note for Winnipeg, forward Adam Lowry was injured in this game. He is now out week to week with a lower body injury. Penguins surprised the Kings in LA 5-1. Sidney Crosby, his 13th of the year. Alex Nedeljkovic had 25 saves in net as they snapped the Kings' 9-game home ice winning streak. Crosby became one of 11 players in NHL history to reach the 50-point mark in 12 or more seasons. In the loss for LA, Adrian Kempe scored his 23rd of the year. Disappointing result for the Kings in their first home game back since the fires in Los Angeles.
I was impressed that the Kings melted down their ice, repainted it for the LA firefighters and first responders there, and then refroze it. That's a lot of work to do mid-season. You don't usually see teams change their center ice design mid-season. So well done by the Kings on that one.
Yeah, it was LA Fire Department insignia, I guess you would say, on center ice. The final game last Monday was the Kraken outscoring the Sabres 6-4. Jared McCann scored his 14th, Matty Beniers his 10th, and Adam Larson got the game winner. Seattle improved to 7-1 all-time against Buffalo. In the loss, Tage Thompson scored his 20th, Jason Zucker his 16th, and Alex Tuck his 15th for the Sabres. We move on to Tuesday, where we had 8 games on the schedule. We'll start with the NHL's top team, the Capitals, who got by the Oilers in Edmonton 3-2. Pierre-Luc Dubois scored the game winner, while Tom Wilson added his 20th of the season. In the loss for Edmonton, playing their first game without suspended star Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl gets his NHL leading 24th of the season. Washington now leads the Metropolitan Division and the NHL at that point with 32 wins and 69 points. Cap star Alexander Ovechkin, no goals, still at that point, 21 away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record with 35 games left to go in the season.
One correction for you there. That was Leon Draisaitl's 34th, not 24th goal of the season.
Thank you for that. That is correct. Hurricanes got by the Stars in Dallas 2-1. Jesperi Kotkaniemi scoring both Carolina goals, numbers 8 and 9, while goaltender Pyotr Kochetkov had 22 saves in net. Carolina moved into the second spot in the Metropolitan Division, 1 point up on New Jersey. Stars at that point were 2-4 following their 7-game winning streak. Rope Hentz did return to the lineup from injury, did not have a point for the Stars. Canadiens edged the Lightning 3-2. Montreal fell behind 2-0, then scored 3 unanswered goals. Jake Evans gets the game winner with 2:15 to go. Canadiens rookie defenseman Lane Hudson had an assist to extend his point streak to 9 games. He also is leading all rookies in points with 39. Tampa Bay had dropped 7 of its last 8 road games at that point.
And Lane Hudson's 9th straight is tying Shane Gostisbehere for the longest assist streak by a rookie defenseman in NHL history. Spoiler alert, that is where it would end. But still an amazing bit of history for the young Habs star, who I think is second right now in the Calder race, but making a great push from a blue line, a guy that nobody was talking about as a potential rookie of the year coming into the year, having an amazing streak and 9 straight games with an assist for a rookie defenseman. Absolutely amazing.
Rangers blanked the Senators 5-0 behind 20 saves from Igor Shesterkin, while Artemi Panarin gets his 20th goal of the season. New York improved to 7-1-3 in its last 11 games. For Ottawa, they remain tied at the time with Montreal and Boston for the last wildcard spot in the East.
Rangers are starting to find themselves and starting to play some good hockey here. Very nice win there. Obviously, a boat race shutout win against a playoff caliber team. Very impressive. And got to give credit to the Rangers. They did not panic when they were struggling. They did not make big changes. They stuck. They believed in what they had. I think it's paying off. And if they make the playoffs, it's a fresh start to the season from there.
Panthers down the Ducks 5-2. Sam Reinhart scored his 28th of the year. Sam Bennett his 14th for Florida. In the loss for Anaheim, forward Trevor Zegras returned to the lineup after missing 22 games following knee surgery. However, the Ducks also announced that Brock McGinn would miss the rest of the season. He's out 7 to 9 months following knee surgery. So not all knee surgeries are the same. Obviously, Trevor Zegras was able to return, but Brock McGinn is done for the rest of the season. Flyers edge the Red Wings 2-1 in overtime on defenseman Rasmus Ristolainen's goal and sudden death. Samuel Ersson, 27 saves in net in the win for Philadelphia. Detroit had dropped 3 in a row and 4 of 5 at that point.
The new coach bump is definitely expired now for the Red Wings. When you said 3 of 4 losses, Todd McClellan now having to find a way to just be a regular coach and not be the new guy in the room, get this team to respond on a regular basis to what he's preaching. Still, though, much better than where they were under Derek Lalonde.
The Predators and Sharks played a couple of wild home games this week. The first one was in Nashville, where the home team was down 3-0 and 5-1 before scoring 6 unanswered goals in a 7-5 win. Predators had 7 different goal scorers. Philip Forsberg gets his 16th. Jonathan Marchessault his 15th to go along with 3 assists for Marchessault as well. San Jose netminder Alexander Georgiev allowed 6 goals on 40 shots. Mikhail Granlund in the loss, 2 goals, numbers 13 and 14. And number 1 overall pick, Macklin Celebrini, added his 14th of the year for San Jose. Round 2 between these two teams coming up.
And that was the first win in Predators history where they had trailed in the game by 4 goals. Previously, they had been 173-0 in games where they faced a 4-goal deficit. Now, thanks to the Sharks, they are 173-0. And in that loss, Macklin Celebrini, as you mentioned, had 2 points to pass Patrick Marleau for the most points by an 18-year-old in Sharks history. He has 34. Marleau had 32 back when he was a rookie. But for the 4-goal comeback, it's a rare feat in the NHL, and it's one that Nashville had never done. But as we saw there, man almighty, what a game and what a comeback. If you were a Stars or Predators fan and you see the team down 5-1, you may have lost hope and thought, how can we get blown out by the Sharks? And then you come back later and you see you won the game in regulation. And if you're a Sharks fan and you got a 5-1 lead, you don't even get a point out of the game. My goodness, it's been a miserable season for the Sharks.
And finally, on Tuesday, the Sabres knocked off the Canucks in Vancouver 3-2. Yuri Kulik and J.J. Peterka had third-period goals to pull out the win for Buffalo. Tage Thompson added his team-leading 21st of the season, and the struggles for Vancouver continue. On to Wednesday, where we had 4 games on the schedule, and the Blue Jackets beat the Atlantic Division-leading Maple Leafs in Toronto 5-1 behind Adam Fantilli's first career hat trick, goals 12, 13, and 14. The Ontario native returning home and having a big game. And there was a great shot of his mom throwing her hat on the ice. And if you're watching on YouTube, we actually have the clip. What hat she was wearing. I wasn't sure if it was a Blue Jackets hat. I'm sure it wasn't. I don't think it was a Maple Leafs hat. But anyway, very cool for his mom to be able to throw her hat on the ice when her son scored the hat trick. Elvis Merzlikins 28 saves, I should say, in the win. Also in this game, we had Toronto captain Austin Matthews scoring the team's lone goal, his 20th. He was also involved in a very unique incident when Blue Jackets goaltender Elvis Merzlikins lost his stick, and then he decided, I'll just grab Austin Matthews' stick out of his hands. So then Matthews decided to pick up Merzlikins' goal stick that was on the ice and try and play with that. They were both called for penalties in a funny moment. Columbus holding down a wild card spot in the East, 7-1-1 in their last 9 at that point. Also in this game, a very eventful game, we had a major heavyweight bout that it was an old school fight between 2 big guys, Ryan Reeves for Toronto and Matthew Olivier for Columbus, squaring off and just trading big right hands in this one. So a lot of interesting things going on in that Blue Jackets Maple Leafs game.
Yeah, you mentioned Adam Fantilli, obviously the 3rd overall pick from a couple of years ago. First career hat trick. He had about 80 family and friends in attendance. And we hear about this a lot where players return to their hometown. He grew up in Nobleton, Ontario, which is about an hour outside of Toronto. And they have a lot of family and friends there. But, spare a thought for the young players making their first trip back to Toronto. That is not a cheap ticket. You come out here, if you're from Southern California and you want to get 80 tickets to a Ducks game, your game check will probably cover it. 80 tickets to the Leafs, that's a big chunk of change, my friend. And his mom, man, she saw it coming. As soon as he got the puck, she stood up and took her hat off. She was ready to go.
She knew, yeah.
That thing went flying, and she started celebrating the moment he scored. So what a moment for him and his family.
Obviously, good seats for his mom, too. She was close enough she could get it on the ice from where she was sitting. So
you would hope mom would have a good seat,
You'd
right?
hope, yeah.
His original landlord. But that is a fantastic moment for him and his family. And what a night for the Blue Jackets to go into Toronto and get an easy win, a 5-1 win on the road. Man, that is not something that they usually have, is relaxing wins in big arenas like that. Toronto is one of the best teams in the league this year, and Columbus made it look easy that night.
Central Division leading Jets edge the Avalanche in Colorado 3-2 in overtime. Defenseman Neil Pionk gets the overtime game winner. It's a fun name to say. Gabe Velarde scored his 20th of the year, and goalie Connor Hellebuck notched his NHL leading 29th win of the season. In the loss, NHL leading scorer Nathan McKinnon gets his 19th goal of the season. That gave him 75 points at that point in the season. Cale Makar gets his 16th goal in the loss. That leads all defensemen in goals. And this would be Mikko Rantanen's last game for the Avalanche. He had an assist in the loss.
If you think Pionk is fun to say, wait until the 3rd period email portion of the show when we have more fun last names.
Kings rally in the 3rd period with 2 goals to pull out a 2-1 win over the defending Stanley Cup champion Panthers. Sammy Helenius gets his first NHL goal to tie it, and then Adrian Kempe notched his team-leading 24th of the season to win it. Goalie Darcy Kemper had 27 saves in net. Florida could not take advantage of the Leafs' loss and remained 3 points back at Toronto for first in the division. And the Devils took care of the Bruins 5-1. Dawson Mercer, a pair of goals, numbers 11 and 12. Captain Nico Hischier gets his 23rd, and Stefan Nason his 18th. But New Jersey's number 1 goalie, Jacob Markstrom, left this game with an injury after a collision with Boston's Justin Brazeau. Jake Allen replaced him, stopped all 16 shots he faced. Devils head coach Sheldon Keefe said after the game that Markstrom was expected to miss some time. We now know that some time is 4 to 6 weeks with a sprained MCL in his left knee. So he is out of the Four Nations face-off for Team Sweden. Philadelphia's Samuel Ersson expected to replace him. But Markstrom obviously has been a big component of the Devils' season so far, and they're going to have to get along without him for 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's a huge loss, but the timing is actually excellent because so much of that is going to be the Four Nations tournament. Sucks for Sweden, handle it, but when you have a 2 or 3 week gap there of no games for a star player to recuperate, that's pretty much ideal timing. If you're going to have to suffer an injury like that, this is a great time to do it.
Moving on to Thursday, 11 games, and the Capitals shut out the Kraken in Seattle 3-0 with Washington star Alexander Ovechkin getting an empty net goal to move 20 goals away from breaking Wayne Gretzky's all-time goal-scoring record with 34 games left in the season at that point. That was career goal number 875. Caps netminder Charlie Lindgren made 22 saves in the shutout as the Capitals get the win, leading the NHL at that point with 71 points and had won 6 games in a row.
It's amazing that we're within 20 goals now of him breaking the record. And as close as it is, I still don't think he's going to get there this year. That's still a lot of goals between now and the end of the season. If we include the playoffs, then but we don't include the playoffs, right?
Yeah, he's going to need a couple of hat tricks along the way. He's kind of running out of season, which we'll tell you about in a little bit.
Yeah, and it's that's the unfortunate thing is if he does, because we don't include the playoff goals, I don't believe we do. I think we determined that.
Yes, you do not.
Which is stupid. But the confusing thing for fans is going to be, let's say he scores 16 goals between now and the end of the regular season. And then he has 5 goals in the playoffs. People are going to be like, well, he broke the record, right? No, these don't count. Why not? Why don't they? He's playing an NHL game. These games count more than any. They're playoff games. Anyway, it's going to be very confusing if he unofficially breaks the record in the postseason.
Bruins shut out the Senators 2-0 behind 29 saves from goalie Jonas Korpisalo, who was traded to Boston from Ottawa in the offseason. Sens had been shut out 5 times in the last 11 games at that point. Morgan Geeky's second period goal would be the only goal the Bruins would need. David Pastrnak, though, iced it with an empty netter, his 23rd of the year. Boston, which had won 9 of its last 11 games at home, went from being tied for the final wildcard spot in the East to 3rd place in the Atlantic with the win, moving 1 point up on idle Tampa Bay, who dropped down into a wildcard spot. For Ottawa, David Perron returned to the lineup after missing 27 games with a back injury. Canadians lost to the Red Wings 4-2, Detroit jumping out to a 3-0 lead and then holding on for the win. Dylan Larkin and Alex DeBrincat each scored their 20th goals of the season, Larkin picking up his 700th career assist as well. Montreal rookie defenseman Lane Hudson, as Doug said with the spoiler alert, had his 9-game point streak come to an end. The Canadian Senators and Rangers were all 1 point back of Columbus for the last wildcard spot in the East at that point. Blue Jackets fall to the Hurricanes 7-4 after falling behind 2-0. Carolina scored 5 straight goals in the second period, saw a total of 7 goals scored in all in a pretty wild second period. Seth Jarvis had 2 goals for the Canes, number 17 and 18 with 2 assists. Sebastian Aho gets his 15th. Blue Jackets goalie Daniil Tarasev allowed 6 goals on 42 shots. Carolina goalie Frederik Andersen gets his 300th NHL win.
And this would be the last game in Carolina for Marty Necas and Jack Drury.
Rangers beat the Flyers 6-1 after allowing the opening goal a minute 25 in. It was all New York after that, with the Blue Shirts getting 3 goals from their blue line as defensemen Adam Fox, Keandre Miller, and Braden Schneider all scored. Rangers moved to 8-1-3 in their last 12 at that point. Philadelphia goalie Samuel Ersson allowed 5 goals on 36 shots.
And remember, that's the Samuel Ersson that's now going to the Four Nations, or is expected to be named to the Four Nations tournament for Sweden.
The Oilers, still minus the suspended Connor McDavid, beat the Canucks 6-2. Zach Hyman had a pair of goals, numbers 16 and 17. Leon Draisaitl adding his NHL-leading 35th goal of the season. Edmonton was now 1-1 at the point without McDavid and had won 9 of its last 12. Vancouver, at that point, had dropped 8 of 10. Oilers remained 1 point back of Vegas for first in the Pacific because the Golden Knights beat the Blues in St. Louis 4-2. Vegas captain Mark Stone scored 19 seconds into the game, and the Golden Knights would never relinquish that lead. Pavel Dorofeyev gets his 21st of the year. Tomas Hertl his 17th with a goal in his 4th straight game.
Let's go back to the Oilers there for a second. And you mentioned Leon Draisaitl getting his 35th goal. He also extended his point scoring streak to 8 games and his home point scoring streak to 17 games. Since December 5th, he has scored in 22 of the 23 games at that point. And he has 42 points in those 23 games. For comparison, Eddie's Kings are led in scoring this year by Adrian Kempe, who has 44 points on the season. Draisaitl has 42 points since December 5th at this point. The man is a machine, and Russian machine doesn't break.
Well, he's a German machine, so you got that.
I'm just saying, you know the old saying of Ovechkin, but this guy's unbelievable. And as you said, without Connor McDavid, you'd think the Canucks are focusing, and all opponents focus on, let's stop Leon Draisaitl, make somebody else beat us. You can't stop this guy. So he's an impressive beast. And because he is German, it would be the same if he was Russian. He gets the Four Nations tournament off. He gets to go rest, recuperate, get ready for the stretch run. It's a huge advantage to teams that have star players that aren't from Sweden, Canada, United States, and Finland, in my opinion.
Flames down the Sabres 5-2. Jonathan Huberdeau scored his 19th. Nazem Kadri is 16th on the win. Rookie goalie Dustin Wolf improved to 17-7-2 on the year, 12-2-1 at home. Calgary held the final wildcard spot in the West. They were 3 points up on Vancouver and St. Louis at that point.
We're not talking enough about Dustin Wolf and Lane Hudson. I know we talk about him every week.
Yeah.
But as a rookie goalie, Dustin Wolf is having an amazingly good year. As a rookie defenseman, Lane Hudson is having an amazingly productive year. Macklin Celebrini is everything he was advertised to be so far. So those are your three to me. And Matvei Michkov is excellent. But I wouldn't even have him as a Calder finalist right now, Michkov, because goalie is the toughest position to play, and Wolf has been great. And defenseman is a very difficult position to come into, play significant minutes, and produce points at, and Hudson has done that. So those two are finalists. Celebrini is the winner, in my opinion, so far.
Utah Hockey Club shut out the Wild in Minnesota 4-0 behind 26 saves from Kirill Velmelka. Clayton Keller gets his 17th of the season in the win for Utah. For Minnesota star Kurt Kaprizov returned to the lineup after missing 12 games due to injury, and captain Jared Spurgeon returned as well. He had missed 9 games with an injury, played in his 900th career game, but neither could spark the Wild to get a win as they lost for the 4th time in 5 games. Ducks down the Penguins 5-1. Mason McTavish and Alex Killorn each had a pair of goals. For McTavish, numbers 8 and 9. For Killorn, numbers 9 and 10. And that was plenty of support for goaltender John Gibson, who made 31 saves in the victory. And in round 2, between the Predators and Sharks, this one in San Jose, Nashville pulled out a 6-5 win. The two teams combined for 5 goals in the first period, 5 more goals in the second period. And then the lone goal in the third period was the game winner from Fedor Svechkov. That's a new one. Philip Forsberg also had 2 goals in the win, numbers 17 and 18. And at that point, he had scored a goal in 7 straight games. Steven Stamkos added his 17th. Sharks young star Macklin Celebrini scored his 15th goal of the season, which leads all rookies. And San Jose netminder Yaroslav Askarov allowed 6 goals on 38 shots.
And you mentioned Forsberg's 7-game scoring streak, tying his own franchise record for longest goal scoring streak, which he set last season. He's the 3rd active player to have multiple 7-game goal scoring streaks. The other 2, Austin Matthews, who has done it 3 times, and Nikita Kucherov, who has also done it twice. And
he had a big scoreless drought earlier in the season, but
the whole team did.
Once he's started scoring, though, it's coming in. It's an old ketchup bottle, as you like to say.
That's a Teemu Selanne thing, that the ketchup doesn't come out of the bottle, but when it starts flowing, it all comes out at once. And yeah, it is flowing right now for Philip Forsberg and the Predators, who are playing a lot better hockey as of late. They're just so buried in the Western Conference that they still have a lot of work to do to get back in a playoff spot.
On to Friday, where we had 4 games. The Stars get by the Golden Knights in Vegas 4-3. Jason Robertson led Dallas with a pair of goals, numbers 16 and 17. His second goal was the game winner in the third period. Rope Hentz added his 20th in the win. Jack Eichel, a pair of goals in defeat for Vegas, numbers 13 and 14. Golden Knights still were holding on to that top spot in the Pacific Division as they extended their franchise record with a power play goal in 8 straight games. But overall, the record 2-6-1 in their last 9.
Woof. They were overdue for a slump, and it has finally come for Vegas. But yet, it shows how well they were playing, that they're 2 wins in their last 9 games and are still in first place as of the end of this game.
The Central Division leading Jets down the Utah Hockey Club 5-2. Cole Perfetti led Winnipeg with a hat trick, goals 8, 9, and 10. Nikolai Ehlers became the first Danish-born player to score 500 career NHL points with a goal and 2 assists. And Connor Hellebuck, 17 saves in net for his NHL-leading 30th win of the season.
Yeah, he's the first netminder of the year to make it to 30 wins, and the third active goalie to reach 30 wins in less than 40 games. Only the 9th to do it in NHL history. If you're watching on YouTube, you see the entire list there. Of course, the iconic Tiny Thompson back in 1929-30 got 30 wins in just 35 games. But in modern history, when hockey looked like the hockey we enjoy today, Linus Ullmark in just 37 a few years back, Braden Holtby in 38 games, Chris Osgood in 38 as well, Eddie Johnston, 38, Bill Durnan, 38. But Connor Hellebuck right there with Andrei Vasilevsky and Pekka Rinne, 39 games to get to 30 wins. Absolutely scorching start to the season for Connor Hellebuck. And the only ones he cares about, though, is getting 16 wins in the postseason, and he doesn't care how many games it takes him to get it.
Lightning edge the Blackhawks 4-3 in overtime. Nikita Kucherov gets the game winner in sudden death, his 23rd of the year. Jake Gensel tied it with a goal with 42 seconds left, his 25th of the season. Chicago scored 3 goals on just 14 shots, but could not hold on for the victory.
And Nikita Kucherov, the 7th active player to have 100 3-point games, as he got his 100th in this one. The others, Sidney Crosby, Alexander Ovechkin, Connor McDavid, Yevgeny Malkin, Patrick Kane, and Steven Stamkos. I was surprised that Leon Draisaitl was not on that list. I think he will be soon enough. And I'm surprised Nathan McKinnon isn't. I would imagine he will be there soon enough. But hats off to Nikita Kucherov. 100 3-point games. Quite an accomplishment right there.
Islanders knocked off the Flyers 3-1. Anthony Duclair and Bo Horvat scored 55 seconds apart in the first period. For Horvat, his 17th. Ilya Sorokin, 29 saves in net. New York had won 6 of 8 at that point.
As I scroll back through the week, it's a bad week for the Flyers. They did not I know they had the win over the Red Wings earlier in the week, but these last 2 wins, they've gotten blown out, only getting 1 goal in each game. 9 goals total. They've given up a bad stretch here for Philadelphia.
As always, a busy Saturday in the NHL with 13 games on the schedule, and the Bruins beat the Avalanche 3-1 in the first game for Colorado since the Mikko Rantanen trade. Morgan Geekie had 2 goals, numbers 14 and 15, and David Pastrnak added his 24th of the season in the win for Boston. Arturi Lehkonen gets his 19th of the season in the loss for Colorado. In their Avalanche debuts, Marty Necas, no points. He was a -3. Jack Drury, no points, and he was a -1.
I mean, they were literally traded the day before, and this was an early face-off. So impressive that they were able to get there at all. Just kind of introductions. Here's your gear. Here's your locker. Let's go play a game. Tough situation and tough results for them.
Meanwhile, the Hurricanes fell to the Islanders 3-2 in overtime. Carolina jumped out to a 2-0 lead, but New York would score the next 3, capped by Brock Nelson's overtime game winner. New York improving to 7-2 in their last 9 at that point. And in his Carolina debut, Mikko Rantanen, no points. He had 5 shots on goal, was a +1, 13 minutes, 32 seconds. Taylor Hall, no points. He played 11 minutes and 36 seconds. One other note involving the Hurricanes, forward William Carrier going to be out a couple of months after undergoing surgery for a lower body injury. And as we update you on the Hurricanes and their new players and the Avalanche and their new players, it is, if you're wondering, the Avalanche and Hurricanes do not play each other this season. So we will not have Mikko Rantanen's return to Colorado this year.
Unless it is in the Stanley Cup final.
Unless it is in the playoffs. That's right. Canucks snapped the Capitals' 6-game winning streak with a 2-1 win. Vancouver star defenseman Quinn Hughes, both goals, numbers 13 and 14. Kevin Lankinen, 32 saves in net. No goals for Alexander Ovechkin. So he enters the new week still 20 away from Wayne Gretzky with 33 games left. If he continues to score at the same rate he has so far this season, he would break the record on April the 12th in Columbus against the Blue Jackets. That would be in game number 79 of the NHL season.
Running out of real estate for this season,
Yeah.
But a definite, assuming he stays healthy, he is going to break it next season. And it's just a matter of where he is when he does it and how much those tickets cost.
Yeah, he's still scoring at an impressive rate after coming back from injury, but he's not getting any multiple goal games. So if he can get a few of those, maybe he's got a shot, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Oilers got by the Sabres 3-2. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, 2 goals, numbers 14 and 15, as Edmonton moved into first place in the Pacific Division. Oilers went 2-1 without suspended star Connor McDavid. And the loss, Alex Tuch gets his 18th of the year for Buffalo. Kraken beat the Penguins 4-1 in a game that was featured as our Puck Podcast watch party, our first of the season. We'll have details on when our next one will be, and we'll explain why maybe you didn't hear about it. But Chris Letang assisted on a Sidney Crosby goal, his 14th of the season. That was the 307th time that those two players have assisted on goals with each other. Only Wayne Gretzky and Paul Coffey had more assists between a forward and a defenseman that were teammates. Evgeny Malkin, by the way, left this game in the first period with an injury, lower body injury, and did not return.
Yeah, we were obviously watching this game with some listeners on YouTube. Did not look like that bad of a hit that Malkin took, but obviously it was severe enough that he missed the rest of the game and was ruled out pretty quickly for return. So hopefully he is okay, because if the Penguins have any chance of getting back in a playoff position, they're going to need him to be not only healthy, but productive.
Devils got by the Canadiens in Montreal 4-3 in overtime on a Jack Hughes breakaway. New Jersey had won 9 straight games in Montreal with that win. Canadiens rookie netminder Jakub Dabiš made 40 saves in a losing effort. That was his first NHL loss in 6 starts. Senators beat the Maple Leafs 2-1. Shane Pinto's third period goal was the difference. Tim Stützle scored his 16th, and goalie Anton Forsberg made 28 saves in net. Forsberg tied Ray Emery for the most starts by a goalie in Senators history with 122.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not only that it's Forsberg that did it, but that's the number.
Yeah.
You know, that they haven't had anybody there long term. I would have thought Dominik Hasek maybe, but then
I don't think he was there very long. Maybe I thought Craig Anderson maybe.
Craig Anderson. Yeah, that seems very surprising that Craig Anderson didn't have more than 122 starts.
Red Wings shut out the Lightning 2-0. Cam Talbot, 28 saves in net for Detroit, as they had won 7 of the last 10 head-to-head meetings against Tampa Bay with that win. Lightning were shut out for the first time in 113 games. Nikita Kucherov's point streak ended at 11 in a row. Tampa Bay's Emil Lilleberg, he'll have a hearing for an interference penalty on Detroit's JT Compher. A high hit after Compher had passed the puck, so he will likely be getting a suspension.
Well, you mentioned the first time the Lightning have been shut out in 113 games. The last time Tampa Bay went scoreless was November 14th of 2023 by Jordan Binnington and the Blues. And the Blues, coincidentally enough, now have the NHL's longest non-shutout streak at 57 games going back to last season. That's also Cam Talbot became the second goalie in NHL history, Eddie, to have multiple shutouts with 6 different franchises. Time for trivia. Name those 6 franchises for Cam Talbot.
All right. Well, there was the Kings.
That's correct.
The Oilers.
That's correct.
The Red Wings.
That's correct. 3 more.
The Flyers.
Incorrect.
Senators.
Incorrect.
What?
2 strikes and you're out, or 1 more and you're out. You got 3 more to get.
I could have swore that he was with Ottawa.
I didn't say he wasn't. I'm saying he didn't have multiple shutouts with him.
All right. Cam Talbot. I'm done. What do we got?
The Minnesota Wild, the Calgary Flames, and the New York Rangers.
Oh,
and
wow.
the other goalie that had 6 different franchises that he had multiple shutouts with was Sean Burke. And I won't make you guess those because it was a long time ago. The Lightning, the Coyotes, the Flyers, the Panthers, Hurricanes, and Devils.
By the way, you mentioned that the after the Lightning had been shut out, that the Blues had the streak.
Yep.
It ended on the same night. They were shut out by the Stars, 2-0. Casey DeSmith, 33 saves in net for Dallas. Evgeny Dadonov and Esa Lindell scoring goals in the first period. Those were the only goals of the game. Dallas had won 7 of 9 on the road at that point. St. Louis just 3-7-1 in division games this year. And it was the first time St. Louis, again, was shut out this season.
Yep.
Blue Jackets edge the Kings 3-2 in overtime. Kirill Marchenko gets the overtime game winner for his 20th goal of the season. Defenseman Zach Werenski added his 16th goal of the year. Kings, though, were able to pull out a point in this one when they pulled their goalie with 3 minutes and 9 seconds left. They then held the puck in the Columbus zone with no stoppages or clears for over 2 minutes before they finally scored on a Quinton Byfield goal to tie it up with 1 minute and 5 seconds left. One injury note for the Blue Jackets forward Sean Monahan going to be out an additional 6 to 8 weeks with a wrist injury that he suffered on January the 7th.
Yeah, tough setback for him. Hopefully he is back for a playoff push that they are still in. And again, at least 3 weeks of that will be the Four Nations tournament. So, at least some not missing too much action there. But you mentioned Zach Werenski with his 16th goal of the season. We have got quite the scoring race going on between him, Quinn Hughes, and Cale Makar this season as defensemen. Makar and Werenski have over 16 goals each, and all three of them have over 50 points. In fact, in the last 30 years, this is only the fourth time that we've had two defensemen score 16 goals or more in their first 50 games of the season. The other three times this happened, we go back to 2015-16 when Brent Burns and Shane Gostisbehere did it. 20 or almost 20 years ago now, Brian McCabe and Matthew Schneider pulled off the feat, and Ray Bourque and Sandis Ozolinsh did it nearly 30 years ago. A lot of former Ducks on that list. I like to see that, or at least two of them, I guess, Schneider and Sandis Ozolinsh. But that was quite the scoring race, as I said. Three guys with over 50 points, just about 50 games through the season: Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, and Zach Werenski. I think we already know who the three finalists for the Norris Trophy are going to be.
Flames got by the Wild 5-4. Andrei Kuzmenko, who came into the game with 2 goals on the season, scored 2 goals, numbers 3 and 4, obviously, including what would turn out to be the game winner in the third period. Matt Zuccarello gets his 12th of the season in the loss for Minnesota, which had dropped 5 of 6 and were 0-2 since the return of Kirill Kaprizov to the lineup. Ducks beat the Predators 5-2. Mason McTavish had his second straight 2-goal game, goals 10 and 11, as Nashville's 5-game winning streak came to an end. Anaheim goalie John Gibson, though, left after the first period with an upper body injury. For Nashville, Philip Forsberg saw his consecutive goal streak end at 7 in a row.
John Gibson was injured in the first period, left in intermission. Lucas Dostal took over and got the win from there. So hopefully Gibson is okay. But Mason McTavish, who's been a snake-bit player all season, finally starting to heat up. He has 4 goals in his last 2 games, back-to-back multiple goal games. If he gets a third one, he becomes one of the few players in NHL history to have 3 straight multiple goal games before turning 22 years old. So we'll see if he's able to pull that off. But it's the first time the Ducks have scored 5 goals in back-to-back games in over 6 years.
Panthers rolled over the Sharks in San Jose 7-2. Florida had 7 different goal scorers. Sam Reinhart gets his 29th, and defenseman Aaron Ekblad, back from injury, gets a goal as well. San Jose goalie Alexander Georgiev was pulled after allowing 4 goals on 13 shots. San Jose has dropped 6 in a row and 10 of 11.
And you mentioned just a bad week for San Jose goaltenders, and Alexander Georgiev in particular in his last 2 games. As I look at this, he gave up 6 goals to Nashville, gave up 4 goals on just 15 shots against the Panthers. You go back a game before that against the Islanders, he gave up 4 goals as well. It has just not been going well for him here in San Jose recently.
And finally, 5 games on Sunday. The Golden Knights knock off the Panthers 4-1. Jack Eichel gets his 15th. Tomas Hertl his 18th into an empty net. Aiden Hill, 32 saves in net for Vegas. This was the Florida Panthers' 4th road game in 6 nights. Also, some news from the Golden Knights we mentioned earlier. Veteran defenseman Alex Pietrangelo announcing he is withdrawing from the Four Nations tournament for Team Canada, so they'll be looking for a defenseman to replace Alex Pietrangelo.
Plenty of good options for Team Canada, for sure.
Avalanche edged the Rangers in New York 5-4. Cale Makar, 2 goals, number 17 and 18. Arturi Lehkonen gets his 20th with 15 seconds left. That was the game winner. Jack Drury scored his first as a member of the Avalanche. Marty Necas had 2 assists, as did Nathan McKinnon, who now leads the NHL with 77 points. In the loss for New York, Artemi Panarin gets his 21st goal of the year. Vincent Trocheck his 15th, and Igor Shesterkin allowed 5 goals on 21 shots. Some more news involving the Rangers. They agreed to terms with veteran defenseman Will Borgen on a 5-year contract extension worth $4.1 million per season.
As a surprising deal to me, I just didn't think Will Borgen was a $4 million a year guy, but Rangers value him. He's been good for them. It certainly keeps a cost certainty as the cap is expected to go up. It won't be that big of a deal going forward for a veteran defenseman that can give you quality minutes. So I guess all said and done, it's probably a pretty good price. But I just thought when I hear Will Borgen, I don't think $4 million a year player in my mind. So that's probably me not watching him enough. But I think that was a big win for Colorado, because when you have the shock of the trade and you get your new players, Jack Drury opened the scoring, which was big, I think, to let him relax and feel like he's part of this team. As you mentioned, Marty Necas with 2 assists as well. But they beat a good team on the road, a team that's been playing well. And I think that lets them all exhale. The new guys feel like they were contributors. They are part of a win. They've got that first win since they lost Rantanen. It was a game where the offense was very prolific again. I think that's a power play looked good. Marty Necas getting an assist on that, on Cale Makar's 18th goal of the season. So I think that was a key win for the Avalanche.
Central Division leading Jets beat the Flames 5-2. Gabe Vilardi, 2 goals, numbers 21 and 22. Mark Scheifele gets his 28th of the year, and Kyle Connor is 27th. In the loss, Nazem Kadri scored his 17th of the season for Calgary. Wild beat the Blackhawks in Chicago 4-2. Minnesota jumping out to a 3-0 lead, then holding on for the win. Joel Eriksson power play goal ended up being the game winner. Chicago has just 1 win in its last 8 games. And our final game of the week, the Senators down the Utah Hockey Club 3-1. Brady Tkachuk, his 19th of the season, while goalie Levi Merilainen gets the win with 34 saves in net. The rookie now 5-1-1 in 7 career starts. In the loss for Utah, Clayton Keller gets his 18th of the season. And news involving Utah, did you see the Utah Yeti's proposed name was refused by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office due to a likelihood of confusion with the Yeti brand of drinkware, coolers, and bags.
Not only the Yeti name, every name they applied for was rejected.
Although I would remind folks that this exact same thing happened to the Vegas Golden Knights, and we discussed it on this show. The U.S. Patent and Trademark Office said there was confusion with the U.S. Army parachute team that was called the Golden Knights.
Likelihood of confusion, yeah.
And we're like, yes, I'm going to buy tickets to see the Golden Knights. What is this hockey thing? I wanted to see the parachutes. It's like, no, I mean, come on. People are not idiots. I'm pretty sure they can figure out a hockey team is not a cooler. So
I'll be, honey. They're doing a hockey game right out here at the airfield.
I mean,
and it's only $20 each. This ain't the hockey team. This is the parachutists.
I think they'll figure it out, but anyway, that was the latest.
It's all just money. It's all just money and appeals, and it'll get figured out. They will be the Utah Yeti if they want to be. But I thought it was interesting that every name they applied for was rejected. You mentioned Florida playing 4 road games in 6 days, obviously a very tough schedule. Yeah. But they can take a back seat to the Ottawa Senators, who just wrapped up a brutal stretch of 12 games in 20 days. And impressively, they went 7-3-2 over those 12 games, all without Linus Ullmark. They had back-to-back games each of the last 3 weekends. So Ottawa with a very difficult schedule this past month, 12 games in 20 days. And it was pretty much a consistent, they never played on Tuesday and they never played on Thursday. But if the rest of the week, they were playing. And very impressive by them. I actually watched this game against Utah, and just a strong team win. They are playing good hockey right now, and getting David Perron back helps fill out those lines. I like what they got going, and we have some impressive news for the Senators when we get to the standings portion of the show.
Well, let's do that right now. And we check in first in the Metropolitan Division, where the top team in the NHL is the top team in the Metro as well, and that's the Washington Capitals, 33-11-5 for 71 points. Second place, you've got the Carolina Hurricanes with 64 points, New Jersey in third place with 62. Columbus right now is in fourth place with 55. Then you got the Rangers with 52, Flyers with 50, Islanders 49 points, and the Penguins with 48.
Penguins in dead last. Hard to believe, but they've earned it. They have not played well. But it's also an impressive group that the worst team has 20 wins on the season. There's no bad teams in this division. And most impressively to me for Washington is that they have a 7-point cushion and games in hand on the teams behind them. So they've played the least amount of games of the top teams and have by far the most points. Very impressive what we've seen from Washington so far.
To the Atlantic Division, where the top team holding on is the Maple Leafs with 62 points, 30-18-2 the record. Florida is just 1 point back, although they have played one more game than the Leafs with 61 points. The Senators are in third place, no longer in the wild card. They're in the third spot in the Atlantic with 56 points. Boston also with 56 points, but Ottawa does have a game in hand. They also have one more regulation win. The Bruins, again, 56 points. Tampa Bay, 55 points. Then you've got the Canadiens with 53 points, Red Wings 51 points, and the Sabres in last with 41 points.
How about not only the Senators in a secured playoff spot, not a wild card, but they have a positive goal differential on the season now of +1 after today's win. Very impressive. By the way, Boston has a -20 goal differential on the season. So they are getting wins where they can, but when they lose big. And that gap right there, the fact that Ottawa is only 6 points out of leading the division is amazing. And yet they are only 5 points up on 7th place. So a very tight group from 3rd to 7th in the Atlantic. And that's going to be a very interesting battle for that final playoff position and some wildcard spots here in the stretch run.
Well, as we check the wildcard spot right now, you would have 5 teams from the Atlantic in the playoffs and just the top 3 teams from the Metro, but it is very close. Boston and Tampa Bay, the final 2 spots there in the wild card. Then Columbus is right there, tied in points with Tampa Bay. Montreal also there as well. And the Rangers and Red Wings not far behind as well. So as we've talked about over the last few weeks, very tight race for the final wildcard spots in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and if you're looking at the potential playoff matchups, as we've talked about, Washington playing Tampa Bay right now, but that's wide open for that final wildcard spot. But as we've said, Toronto playing Boston in that first round, that's not a dream matchup if you're a Maple Leafs fan. You got some PTSD from that one. And then the playoff matchup, Florida and Ottawa, a lot of travel for that tournament or that playoff matchup potentially. And then Carolina, New Jersey, which would be a doozy.
All right, let's check out the West. We'll start in the Pacific Division. Golden Knights right now are in the top spot thanks to their win Sunday night over the Florida Panthers. Overall record of 31-15-4 for 66 points. That's 1 point better than the Edmonton Oilers, although Edmonton has a game in hand on the Golden Knights. The Kings in third place with 58 points. Calgary 3 points back with 55 points. Then you got Vancouver with 52 points, Seattle 47, the Ducks with 46, and the Sharks with 32 points on the season.
Ducks play the Kraken tomorrow night for 6th place on the line in the Pacific Division. I care. Nobody else does. I'm impressed by Calgary. I did not think they would be. Now, I get that the Kings have 2 games in hand on them, but I did not think they would be within 3 points of a guaranteed playoff spot this late into the season as we approach the 50-game mark. So very impressive by them. And Vancouver, man, they cannot find consistency, but they are still right in the thick of things. And we will look in the wildcard spot when we get to it in a second. But impressive there. It's going to be a good battle, though, between Edmonton and Vegas, I think, for the top spot. I don't think the Kings have enough in the tank to get up there and pass either one of them. But those 2 teams, I think, are going to fight. And the games remaining between those 2 are going to be must-see TV.
Over the Central Division, Winnipeg Jets leading the way, 71 points, record of 34-14-3. Dallas is now moved into the second spot in the Central Division with 63 points, 1 point ahead of Minnesota, who's now in third. Colorado with 60 points is certainly right there in the mix. Then you've got St. Louis dropping down 50 points. Utah 49, Nashville 43 points, and Chicago with 35 points.
I mean, you go back to what we talked about with the Metropolitan, where there are no bad teams. There are some bad teams in this one, and Chicago is primarily among them, obviously, the worst team in the league right now. Well, second worst to San Jose for that number 1 pick in the lottery, at least. But when you look at the top here, Winnipeg has a very comfortable lead, 8 points. Even with games in hand, Dallas would have to do some great hockey over the last 30 games or so to catch and pass them. But I think the real battle is going to be for that third second and third playoff spot. Minnesota somehow, some way is there. I still am amazed by what they've been able to do so far this season. I don't think they have enough to hold off Colorado when it's all said and done. I think it'll be Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado, but Minnesota should have enough to get a playoff spot for sure. It's that last battle for the wild card, and let's take a look at the wild card standings in the Western Conference.
By the way, just real quick, I should point out that Winnipeg is tied with Washington for the most points in the NHL, both with 71.
Yep. So right now, you've got a team out of the Pacific and a team out of the Central in the wild card spot. Obviously, Winnipeg, Dallas, and Minnesota out of the Central getting automatic berths. Vegas, Edmonton, and LA in the Pacific. But Colorado is the number one wild card pretty comfortably. And then Calgary is second for that wild card. And there's a little bit of a gap there, 3 points between them and Vancouver. Calgary and Vancouver have played exactly the same number of games, so no advantage there. They've played less than the team that is chasing them, St. Louis, who 2 games in hand on the Blues for both of them. And then Utah, Seattle, and Anaheim still technically, and Nashville still technically in it, but all of them have a lot of work to do and a lot of teams to catch and pass if they want to make a playoff run.
All right. As we wrap it up here, did you want to give any stat leaders, or shall we say that's it for the first period?
I'll give the stat leaders. They deserve their praise. Let's take a look at the goal-scoring leader in the NHL, and that is, of course, Leon Draisaitl, still the only player in the NHL with 30 goals. He has 35 on the year. Sam Reinhart is in second with 29 for the Florida Panthers. William Nylander and Mark Scheifele of the Maple Leafs and Jets, respectively, tied for third with 28. Your assist leader is Nathan MacKinnon with 58 for the Avalanche. Mitch Marner of the Maple Leafs has 53 for second, and Nikita Kucherov has 50 for the Lightning in third. As for your point leader, if you've done the math, you can probably figure out, well, I didn't actually give goals and everything for everybody. So Nathan MacKinnon leads the league in points with 77. Leon Draisaitl is second with 74, and Nikita Kucherov is in third with 73. Those are the only 3 players that have 70 points on the season. As for your goaltending leader, your wins leader is, of course, Connor Hellebuyck, the only one with 30 wins already. Jake Ottinger of the Stars has 24 for second, and Logan Thompson of the Capitals is in third with 22 wins on the year. Your goals against leader for the season is Connor Hellebuyck with a 2.02 through 39 games. Logan Thompson of the Capitals, 2.09, is in second. Darcy Kemper, slightly, it's after the 2.09 for the Kings, is also there tied for second place. Save percentage leader, same guys as always. Connor Hellebuyck, 926 on the season. My goodness, that's good. Logan Thompson, 925, and Darcy Kemper with a 922.
All right, that'll do it for our look back at the week that was in the NHL. Hopefully you're all ready and caught up now for the new week ahead, and that'll do it for our first period of our YouTube show. If you enjoyed what you saw and heard, you can check out the remaining 2 periods of our show on our podcast. Just search Puck Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcast. If you're listening to the podcast, the second and third periods are coming up. And if you're watching on YouTube, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand, and we'll talk to you next week with another edition of the Puck Podcast.